Welcome to Network Capital, Rohan.
Thank you.
In this podcast, we try and really understand why people do what they do. So tell us very briefly who you are and what you do today.
Okay, so my name is Rohan Manchanda. Very fairly standard story. I was born in Lucknow, but did not stay there too long. Then family moved to Faridabad, which were my formative years. And I think towards the end of 10th grade, MBA became kind of like a cornerstone, because very typical parental mindset that until unless you go do an MBA, you will not be considered 10th pass. So I was very driven by...
Of course.
I want to be candid also at this point of time, because like that smile on my mother's face when she was watching cat videos, etc. on, when I say cat, like the common admission test or
yeah, of course.
CNBC. So her face lit up, and then she said like, okay, do an MBA. And then at that point of time, I also told myself that okay, this like seemed like a viable option, and professional success may or may not come, but at least the probability of professional success definitely increases by doing an MBA. So had a traditional career path, did engineering from BITS Pilani, 9 to 13, joined Accenture Strategy in their consulting division, focused on retail, automotive, and a little bit of pharmaceutical. After about 2 years, I think, I was also searching for more personal impact, that can I have more success. So at that point of time, Mr. Tata, who had like left the reins of Tata Sons and taken over the philanthropy, which were 125-year-old institutions, so he wanted to professionalize them and make sure that they're becoming newer and more agile. So he wanted some young people, young blood to come and like execute from the word go, change from a grant-giving organization to more project-focused and execution-oriented. So I got, like, at least I had the good fortune of getting an offer from the Tata Trust to work on his pet projects, mostly around healthcare, nutrition, water, and sanitation. So joined the Tata Trust in 2015, July. Very quickly after 6 months, he sent me to work for the Indian government. That's where my Indian government stint happened, where I started working on Swachh Bharat. I was stationed at the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, mostly working on policy and execution. Working along with states, different districts, had the time of my life, saw what scale looks like, saw what minority, majority, how different like really it is to enact one policy for 1.35 billion people, and then thoughts on leadership, management also changed. Had another good opportunity to manage around 450 odd people across, which I wrote about in my Stanford application, that okay, that was the definition of professional success for me, which is also what mattered most to me at that point of time. It still does, that I'm very much driven by success / impact or / massive impact.
So tell us more about that.
So yeah, I mean, conventional wisdom, and like this is where I want to begin Stanford also. I think I hate the idea of failure. I don't want to romanticize it. I want to learn from my own mistakes. But I think what has kept me driven was small successes or large successes in part, and that's what I was continuously searching for. And whenever I thought that, okay, growth in success is not happening, like I need to make a shift. So that consistency of decision making, I thought I had maintained in my life, and that has always been a driving factor in, at least I would say, in my personal, professional, emotional, and social life. In all of these 4 dimensions, I've strived for success, or I do not want to fail, for the lack of better words.
Yeah.
But I'm fine accepting failure as it comes along. So yeah, that was Indian government. I worked there for about 2 to 2.5 years. Got the Stanford admit, applied round 2, and then came back to Tata Trust to work on cancer care, because I really wanted to work on healthcare again. Something that I
came back from.
So the Indian government stint ended in January 18, which is when I had also received my Stanford admit, and then I said that I do want to go back, work only on trust projects and not with the Indian government, because I thought that became very monotonous. I found it very, very impatient to deal with a lot of different set of stakeholders which were there at central, state, and district level also. So I went back, worked on the cancer care program, which I dealt with state governments but in a more senior capacity. So came with, again, renewed thoughts on what management looks like, what mistakes I've taken, what mistakes I've committed as like a 20-something who was managing a decently large cadre of people. So came back there, worked till the start of my MBA at Stanford, and then went to Stanford.
Yeah.
Personally, I really enjoyed running quite a bit. I won't call myself a long distance runner, but every single day I would 10 to 11 kilometers is something. I do enjoy running. I love humor. Keeps me going, I think. And so yeah, that was.
So this conversation, let's break it down into pre-Stanford, at Stanford, and post-Stanford. Right. All right. So pre-Stanford, when you're writing a question like, what do you do and why, or what matters most to you,
right.
How did you start thinking about that question? Because it's really vague, right? Sometimes, how do you, at 25 or 27, how do you know what matters most to you?
Correct.
Tell us how you went about it.
So again, against conventional wisdom, people said that, okay, do some deep reflection and then see what patterns emerge. A part of that was reflection, but how I perceived it was, if I've had consistency of decision making in my entire life, if I've been presented with certain set of opportunities, like let's say 10 opportunities, and I've chosen A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and if they present a common theme that will show Stanford, and I do not even have to tell them that, okay, this is what matters most to me. So that consistency of decision making and me saying no to certain opportunities at that point of time, I literally wrote them down on a piece of paper and then said that this is what I have chosen my entire.
So what did you write on that piece of paper?
So yes, I mean, I had 3 or 4 different opportunities at my point of life, and it was very, very
Accenture, Tata Trust,
yes.
and government.
Yes, so one was like, should I do engineering versus not do engineering? One
Hey, you're an Indian guy. I'm
an Indian guy, yeah.
I'm kidding.
So,
yeah.
No, that consideration came, but
yeah.
I think, like Stanford accepted that honesty that, okay, he's an Indian guy who's going to do engineering anyway, because that is the accepted norm. But apart from that, what are the other opportunities which I had? One was like going to special class railway apprentice, which was like a decently prestigious program in Jamalpur.
I don't think everyone would know what is that.
So special class railway apprentice, for the lack of better words, is the IAS of the railways.
Mm-hmm.
And it was started by the Britishers. Now the program has been stopped. But at the age of 18, you're sent to Jamalpur, where your class 1 service starts. So railways are, I would say, the only services in India which are not administered by the IAS.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, the charm of SCRA for people who wanted to be in railways and command when aviation was not that big was pretty compelling. So my father had asked me that, okay, you should apply to this. So I had received All India rank 16. Around 1.5 lakh people still used to give the exam when I gave it in 2009. So I had the option of either joining Pilani or
going to SCRA.
So at that point of time, I chose Pilani because I was interested in engineering, and I thought that engineering would probably give me the skills which are valuable in the future and not be in government service.
Right.
So that is one of the things which I thought were very pivotal moments in my career, me saying no to that. Second was, of course, like when I was choosing different job opportunities
out of undergrad,
right?
Yeah.
And most people do not write about this in the Stanford essay. They would write something softer, but I chose that, okay, let me just tell why I chose Accenture over a banking job or a venture capital job. So I just said that, okay, this was something I wanted to gain problem solving skills, and which is why I chose. So again, like me saying no to one opportunity and choosing the other because it gave me slightly more success, slightly more impact. So I wrote about that. Then I wrote about a couple of opportunities which I received at the Tata Trust, like a couple of project opportunities, and me saying no to staying in the trust versus going to the Indian government and accepting that role, because again, that would have meant more success, more impact at that point of time for me. And I said that this has been something which is extremely gratifying, because I learned to lead above me, below me, make mistakes, and the kind of freedom of decision making I've had in the Indian government was something truly unique, and which was this was my essay 1.
So you've written essay 1 being what matters most to you and why. So you've written all of these things down, very interesting framework. When you were synthesizing it, writing it down on paper, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? Because it's not an easy question, right?
Like, it is not an easy question at all. I think because the question literally is what matters most to you and why. The why, I think, like, firstly for me answering like why does success matter most to you, and like why not failure?
Or why do you not like failure?
Why do you not like failure? I think those were the biggest challenges I had to confront. Or why a lot of people end up writing about their family, a lot of people write about their personal experiences, or they value freedom, or some softer quality like that. But I was choosing a theme which was not very conventional, or something which goes very anti-Stanford philosophy, where they not romanticize failure, but they say like, okay, if you fail, you'll have growth, right? So they are believers in growth mindset. So getting over that challenge of why literary success mattered most to you was something like which I struggled with, and how I answered this was that I've been able to give up such small things in life, which included birthdays of my family, weddings in my family, or me playing cricket for 3 years straight, something which I like really loved, right? But something which is very small. I think that paved the way for a very innocent essay, and I think that kind of did the job.
Innocent or honest?
Honest, and I would say, I mean, because the counterpoint was the opportunities which I chose genuinely led to massive success, right? Because I was also able to say that because I was there in the Indian government, my ability to impact like literally 600 million people were there. And some of that was backed by data also from Indian government, that this is how we have progressed in terms of sanitation outcomes.
So talk to us about that, because that's one aspect of the essay, what matters to you. They also like to, most business schools also want to ask, what have you really achieved? Where do you want to go?
Right.
So how did you
I think,
that?
Achievement is very important to Stanford. I think they would, in one way or the other, whether it be in essays or in your profile, which you want to call it your resume, or even in the application form, they want like absolute evidence of you have achieved something.
So evidence meaning data?
Evidence meaning data, and one, even if you cannot have data, it should be observable. One thing which a lot of people miss, sometimes there are softer things which you really cannot measure.
Yeah.
Like if you're improving health outcome, it definitely takes 10 years. But if you can sincerely tell them that, okay, this has been observable, I think a school like Stanford, and my sense is others also would tend to believe that, okay, you are telling us a sincere version of your own story, and we believe in that. Second thing which I think Stanford really values, and what I was struggling with, like how do I differentiate myself also?
Yeah.
And I had always considered myself somebody to be stepping up on problems.
What do you mean by that?
So Stanford wants people who don't sit, even if it's...
That's why you run so much, right? Yeah.
That is, like, one of the reasons is definitely that. I think solving any problem just requires you to step up and like take certain amount of risk, offend people also. When you have a problem, you end up thinking, and when you end up thinking, you end up leading to solutions also. So if one is that problems are coming your way, which you are supposed to solve, one is you identifying problems and then taking even the smallest steps possible to solve those problems. So I wrote about them that these are not problems which came my way, but some of them, not all of them, some of them I had identified, and I felt the need to step up or even work on weekends and give up personal life at that point of time to make the case that I really like problem solving. Many of the times there have been instances where I've been lazy in life also, but there have been times where I genuinely cared, okay, like this can be improved.
So if you were to, and this is obviously speculation, but if you were to understand what differentiated you from other applicants, what would that be? Is it problem solving? Is it your choices? Is it both? Is it something else?
So one thing was, I would say consistency of these choices over a prolonged period of time. I mean, this was something I was demonstrating to them at least since class 10th and 11th, if not from childhood onwards. A lot of people are able to do that they are living life by their own rules since childhood itself. Those are the most compelling candidates, those are the most powerful, most potent candidates for Stanford. But I think what really differentiated me whenever I wrote these stories, they formed a theme for a prolonged period of time. And I think when you tell people that, okay, I've done this, they at least start seeing a pattern, and when that pattern emerges, they at least call you for an interview. Okay, at least we want to meet you, and then we'll see where it goes from there, whether you have really done this or you're just making this stuff up.
Right. And many of these applications also talk about failure. So how did you think of writing that? Was that a question in your year?
So Stanford does not explicitly ask for where you have failed, but there have been like monumental failures in my life also. some of which I reflected in the optional thing. I mean,
are you comfortable talking about it?
Very, very comfortable.
Yeah.
So they give you the opportunity to explain, like if you've had something horribly go wrong. Stanford cares about grades. Like, I will be very, very honest. They do not want you to have like perfect grades, but they want you to show some intellectual vitality by showing that you care, like you are sincere enough. I was not sincere enough in my first and second year of college. All my computer programming grades were D's and E's, literally. So I wrote 2 lines saying that these grades appear on my transcript. I have absolutely no excuse for my poor performance, but if you remove them, my GPA will go up. So I literally wrote these 3 lines that I have absolutely no excuse for them. But then what that had offset was I had a decent GMAT of 740. Again, not a stellar one of 750, 60, but combined with my GPA and GMAT, I think that I consider, by Indian standards, it is difficult. Like when you have that bad grades in first or second year, you really need to offset it by something else, or a really excellent GMAT/GRE score.
Yeah.
So one, accepting those failures, because Stanford would have had those questions. You do not have the most stellar GPA. Why should we get you in?
Right.
So accepting that and not being vulnerable, but just saying like I have absolutely no excuses. I just did not study at that point of time. Help, I would say. And my recommenders, I think, when I discussed with them that I would want you to talk about.
How did you choose your referees?
So one was the person who I directly worked with in the Indian government, like one of the joint secretaries. I would fondly call her Radha ma'am. So she was overseeing my own leadership of those 450 young professionals which I had formulated. So she was able to write that how I designed the program, how I recruited these people, how these people performed, what kind of challenges I was able to help these people out with, what kind of challenges I faced. And she also knew that these are the weaknesses with this guy, like, and she can write honestly about them. And so she was able to do that. Second, I chose my boss at Tata Trust, Venkat. So he was the managing trustee of the Tata Trust, and I thought these 2 people would make for 2 excellent candidates who know me really well and who are very, very invested in my success, of course, and they would want me to go to someplace nice.
Right.
And they ended up writing my recommendations. I was confused because I had worked for Accenture also. That question naturally came to my mind, that can I have the managing director of Accenture or my previous manager, senior manager, write one instead of these 2 people from similar backgrounds,
and talk about the same story or similar stories.
Correct. This is what I realized. Letters of recommendation are one of the least important aspects of the Stanford MBA, I think.
Talk about radical candor in a podcast. I think this is it. Yeah.
As long as they do not project you in extremely negative light, one of those.
Then you did a great job of picking those referees, right? You pick somebody and they talk horrible about you. That means it's saying a lot about your own decision.
Your own judgment, right?
Yeah. And you shouldn't get in then.
Business schools are smart. They know, like, letters of recommendation are padded to an extent, if not completely padded, right? So they would also know that as long as you have no significant negative references, you're okay. They would search for, they would typically search for ethics. The deal breakers are horrible interpersonal skills. All of us struggle interpersonally. Horrible interpersonal skills are a deal breaker.
In a business school, it can be challenging.
In a business school, they can be challenging. But on the flip side, I think my letters of recommendation, I did not have access to them, but whatever I discussed and collaborated, that would you be able to talk about these certain qualities of mine, which actually differentiate me from other people, which I think would be very helpful. And my recommenders were very open with me to collaborating, right? And
you mean, did you write reference points for them or discuss it with them?
Not even those. So, naturally, everybody gets tempted. Can I give you something? My recommenders, I was also fortunate that they were smart enough to write these on their own, in their own language, because they were articulate with their thoughts, they were articulate with their words also, and that's why I was very, very comfortable telling them that, okay, go ahead. Because these recommenders had also submitted previous recommendations, so they knew how the system works. And they would not beat around the bush, they would keep in the word limit, and that's how pretty much I chose my letters of recommendation.
Right.
And these two people, and I think
And then most essays also ask you to reflect on your goals post the MBA.
Yeah.
So how did you think about those questions?
So that's the second part of the Stanford application. What matters most is all about your past. Who are you as a person in the past?
Yeah.
Why Stanford is all about future.
Yeah.
Stanford does not care about whether you want to be a product manager, entrepreneur, politician. They want you, and they wanted me also to say, which is the problem you are most passionate about. Let's say I was passionate about healthcare delivery or healthcare implementation. I said that I wanted to be a leader who solves the healthcare implementation problem in India, and these are the 4 or 5 sub-problems which I identify, and my post-MBA goals are literally aimed at solving these 4 or 5 sub-problems which lead to the further solving of the healthcare delivery problem.
Right.
So, because I myself was not sure about my post-MBA goals, but writing that I have absolutely no clue did not make sense. And neither do their advice.
Yeah.
But they want to know that this is an issue you care about. You have thought about this issue has 4 or 5 sub-issues. Stanford will help you in 4 or 5 different ways in this 4 or 5 sub-issues, and you will be able to solve that larger problem which you have talked about.
Right.
So that is how I.
That's the framework that you thought
that is
for.
the framework I also thought about post MBA, and
do you have any general advice for people who are looking to either think about? Let's not just talk about post MBA, but like future goals. How should they go about?
So speaking from personal experience, I have always wanted to rise above mediocre masses, which I generally consider that the traditional companies which come for recruiting, I will actively say no to them. This is a very irrational choice, very unevidenced thought process.
You mean mass recruiters, right?
Mass recruiters.
Yeah.
Because I've always been thinking that at least the period of 25 to 35 are the best years of my life. My post-MBA goals should literally be on how many lives I can influence positively through my own behavior. And which I would say at least I would want to do millions, because I've had the opportunity of doing that before. Can I do that before? Can I do that after MBA also? So naturally, two themes emerged to me. One was politics and governance. I thought incredibly gratifying field. And second was entrepreneurship. So that way it came very, very naturally to me that these two paths lead to a career where I can achieve that aim of influencing millions of lives positively, right? So that's how I thought, and that's how I wrote about it also, that I would want to lead certain initiatives which help me achieve this kind of goal. And if I'm to give very prescriptive advice on how to come up with future or career goals, I would say that this is very standard advice. I think whatever gives you meaning and whatever you feel responsible for, not happiness. I think that Western trope of we should strive for something which gives us happiness is wrong. I think whatever gives you meaning in life, you can figure that out. And whatever you feel responsible for, I think
we are all searching for meaning. I've written about it this as well, that meaning outscores happiness by a large factor.
Correct. I think I consider myself to be very fortunate. If I get happiness on the way, I'm very, very fortunate. Because, little bit digression, like I do consider life as a fatal disease. It's not easy to live. It's like filled with suffering, burden, and so.
I think who was it? John Maynard Keynes, right? Life is nasty, brutish, and short.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it was him, but yeah.
So that way I thought, if I'm only going to consider my own happiness and choose a career goal which makes me happy, then I will get into that same idea of money, fame, power triangle, whatever. How do I want to optimize 2 of them or 3 of them? So I said, skip that. Like, what gives me meaning is I love talking to people. I love addressing large gatherings. Like, how I love making people smile through humor, love doing silly stuff. Like, how can I combine all of them? What makes sense? So that way entrepreneurship naturally emerged. And for other people, it can be as simple as literally having decent amount of money. I have immense respect for people who are money. When I say they are driven by exceptional amount of wealth, they just want to amass exceptional amount of wealth on a risk-adjusted basis. Not take too much risk, but go for the highest paying job also. Because they have clarity. Like, I think or some people are in that phase of life where it would gratify them to a certain extent. I think that would change in their own life in the future. But how I personally went about it was what is giving me meaning, which was talking to other people, helping them realize, giving meaning to others' lives also. Something which is also mentioned on the Network Capital's cover photo.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. That's how I chose future goals. And then I was aimed at problem solving and not on.
And you've trained yourself to become a good problem solver. That's one theme that I see from undergrad to now. By actively picking problems that require problem solving, critical thinking, you've become better at it. That's how you become good at anything.
Correct. Some of these times it was just saying yes, like, okay, let's just do this, and not saying enough no. Because I like that sense of adventure and problem also. Whatever, there might be failure, there might be success, but there can be success. So I was motivated by that there might be light at the end of the tunnel. So that kind of problem solving was definitely it's still very, very attractive.
We'll come to that in case studies in business schools. But tell me, was there any non-work stuff that you wrote about in your application, or should people write about that?
Non-work related stuff?
For example, I act and I debate, and I had written about it extensively. It worked for me.
I would say not even required. I think Stanford wants to know you have a personality outside work, or you have a personality that you care.
Yeah.
Because outside work is at least 1/3 of your life, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
So they would want to know what are you doing outside of work. I wrote, like, when I was approaching this, I wrote about how I was managing my university's angel investment fund, and how I had been doing that one same single activity for 5 years by helping some of the entrepreneurs who were coming out of BITS,
mm-hmm.
and helping them raise small amounts of seed funding, some of the companies which then had gone on to become bigger.
Right.
So I told them that this is one activity which keeps me excited, because I consider it no greater privilege than to learn from experts in their field. So I wrote about that, and I think Stanford definitely values outside of work personality, and if there is one thing which you have continued doing for 4 or 5 years, extremely
I think it's
powerful.
so important. Like, if you
Extremely
pick up a hobby 3 months before the deadline, I mean, it's not necessarily speaking volumes about the impact that you can have.
Correct.
For the interview, when you finished your application and hit the submit button, did you think you'll get an interview call?
I was not underconfident.
Okay, that's great.
That I had an inkling that this is a powerful enough application, because somewhere down the line I thought things are falling into place. I've carefully filled out the form. The form is also very important, which, like, I'm more than happy to talk about. I thought...
No, please tell us about it.
Because I think the form itself is 50% of the application, much more important than letters of recommendation.
Do you guys know what form he's talking about?
Because the form has short answer questions.
People
also.
often think that it's only the 500 and 1,000 words, but it's half of the application. 60% is those small answer questions.
Yes. I'll give you a very small example of what's there in the application form. So they would ask, and this is where they would ask, what are your post-MBA goals? And I think a great, or like at least a good answer to post-MBA goals is, let's say somebody wants to be a management consultant. I want to be a management consultant in the healthcare field so that I can solve A, B, C, D, E, F problem. And articulating it in this way, that why do you want to pick up a certain field so that it gives you X, Y, Z skills, which will then help you in your own achievement of bigger goal, helps. Stanford always asks, like, pick an instance where...
Should people write, I want to work at McKinsey or X or Y? Or should they stick to management consulting?
It's a personal choice. I did not write. I just wrote
What did you write roughly?
I wrote that I want to work in a healthcare firm, which gives me exposure to collaboration between public and private sector agencies, which gives me exposure to how capital is allocated in the healthcare business, how payer and provider solution works across the globe and in India as well. So that way, like, these 3 or 4 things I had written down, that a healthcare firm should be able to give me these execution skills.
Right.
So then the larger point of becoming a healthcare leader at least is strengthened.
Yeah.
So I wrote these things, but I know like many of my friends have written that I want to join a firm such as McKinsey and BCG in their social impact division doing XYZ. People have written that, and that has worked.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, the way I read this question, or most questions in business school, is that they want to know the thought process. They want to know consistency of decision making. They know that you've spoken to enough people to know roughly what it looks like.
Correct.
And I think all of these business schools sort of know that you can change your goal. I mean, they're not expecting to literally, nobody will hold you accountable.
Yeah.
They just want to see that if do you have some sort of consistency in decision making or not. And I think either is fine, but do know that if you write a company name, then you're just like narrowing the pool a little bit. There are some people who go that route. For example, I know some people who written, I want to be the prime minister of country X, and go on and do, and then they wrote the explanation of why their career led to that goal, and it worked for them. And for very similar, without the rationale, it didn't work for them. So depends on what you want to strive.
Correct.
Yes, just staying on that. Any other piece of advice on this?
I mean, in terms of, I've always, at least whenever people have come up to me and asked like, what are those 2 essays all about? I've always looked at it as one essay because it flows. So when you submit the essays, you have to paste them in one file. When an essay reader at Stanford, and they call them gatekeepers there, do an exceptional job. When they read your essay, they read what matters most to you and why. They immediately go on to why Stanford. If there's a major disconnect between where you're ending and where you're starting, it is a yellow flag, if not a red flag.
Right.
They are one essay because you're going from past to future, and there has to be some logic behind both of them.
Right.
I would say like if people can consider both these essays as one, it will be easier to write. Second, it will be easier to convince Stanford also that you have thought through this.
Excellent advice. I think that's the entire application is one mega structure that you should keep in mind. So he was not underconfident for his application, which is great. It doesn't show anything else but good preparation. When the interview call came, how did you go about preparing for it, and how do you think your interview went?
So this is where I want to be candid.
Yeah.
I don't think the Stanford interview matters in
Okay.
selection. They are looking for validation of communication skills, and they're looking for general themes of validation which they don't know, I do not know. This is my sense. The Stanford interview.
But you obviously, now that you've gotten in, you have much more insight. But when you got the call,
yes.
Yeah.
So when I got the call, I think I knew that I wanted to prepare 3 or 4 times with my own self and my own friends on 3 major questions, which I think everybody should prepare. Why Stanford? Why now? Why MBA? These are asked in one same breath.
in different words by all schools.
In different words by all schools, and I think to have a very compelling answer on why now, why Stanford, why MBA helps. I'll try and give an example of how I went on preparing each of these. Why now? My answer was simple, that I am at a phase of life where I've seen some success, some failures, but I also have some ambition which I do not want it to die down. 1 year waiting would mean that ambition dies down.
Love it. Excellent.
I did not apply last year because I thought that this is the right time to apply, and I now can contribute to the class also.
Yeah.
Last year I was not prepared. So that way, that fine balance of last year versus the next year versus now. So that
So
way
with this you perfected timing.
So that way, like, it made sense that, okay,
Yeah.
if I wait, I just do not want my ambition to die down. My ambition is at its peak. Why MBA was, again, I took the problem solving approach because I said that I'm at that wonderful phase of my life where I've seen all these things which are leading to my goal of becoming a healthcare leader. And one point is staying in my current role, while very, very gratifying, is going to slow me down. So I was candid enough to word it carefully also that I want to have more impact and more success by taking the MBA because it's going to give me 4 edges, which were behavioral, analytical, informational, and technical. So that's how I said, which is like I gave it an acronym like BATE. That behavioral, so, which is kind of true also.
It's an incredible one, by the way.
Which is I would say that what the MBA is about, at least in these days. Initially, it was all about hard skills, but now I would say behavioral, because when you're surrounded by exceptionally smart people, you tend to analyze people in general and evaluate people. It's a bad word, but like I hope people get the gist of it. You get to interact with so many people so that you get to evaluate people better also. Makes great investors. That's how they pick up great people also. You start identifying skills versus non-skilled people.
Yeah.
Analytically, because those are the hard skills part, and I think you just become more analytical in your thinking. Information, because you have the best in class information flow at that point of time. 90 different countries, 400 different people, or HBSs, 1,000 different people and other schools. When they come together, sit in a classroom at one single point of time for 2 years or 1 year or whatever the time frame is, the information flow is best in class. That will not be replicated, and I think that is what Stanford, Harvard, or any business school charges you that much for, that we have created this unique context for you, which is so hard to create. Technical, again I say, like if there were skills which you thought, okay, I want to become a great SEO expert or data scientist or a great marketer. So those kind of technical skills can also be honed in the MBA. Not all people, I would say, that need all of these skills, but I'd say that they will give me edges in all these 4 dimensions. So that's how I position that, why I want to do an MBA, because MBA will give me this BATE edge, behavioral, analytical, informational, technical. The last was why Stanford. Why Stanford was also like fairly straightforward for me, saying that because these goals are very, very clear in my head, Stanford is very uniquely positioned to offer me these courses. Now, one thing about Stanford here is Stanford loves hearing about its courses, not about its clubs, not about its organizations, or about its network or access to Silicon Valley. Because I think those are old tropes now. They are valid, but unless and until you have a very compelling reasoning why you want to be around Silicon Valley, do not write about that. Do not write about clubs and organizations, because Stanford's clubs and organization culture are not its strongest point. People engage more with academics, people engage more with experiences, people engage more with each other to think about how do we grow each other. Those are the most, and Stanford prides itself on having or producing leaders with exceptionally high emotional intelligence. So those are the unique selling points of Stanford also, given the drastic decline in the value of MBA. They're solely focused on leadership, and that's how I also said that this is why I want to do Stanford. And layer it with 2 or 3 extremely compelling courses, one of which is Interpersonal Dynamics, in which you have a safe space, you have a T group of 12 different odd people, and you have private conversations on how you're feeling, how your actions impact me, how do you give feedback to other people, how you get feedback. And that is one of the most defining courses of Stanford, and I wrote about that, and I said that this is how it's going to help me. So that's how I addressed the interview question of, which did come up by the way, why now, why MBA, why Stanford. And second was preparing the stories well, I think, in a very structured format. I knew that most of my stories are going to be questioned, and I'd much rather have a very bullet point list which I had prepared, and then I'll form sentences around the same. And I was careful enough to not memorize them, but practice them 3 to 4 times so that I know that it's not robotic, but at that same point of time, I have thought these through. And the form, like the structure of them were challenge, action, result. This was a challenge I faced in my life. This is the action I took, and this is where the result was. So, and I prepared 3 or 4 stories, which I could fit into different kind of questions. And I did that 3 or 4 odd times. So that was pretty much interview preparation. And I made sure I did that with friends because they were able to give me candid feedback. and I reached out to my old colleagues to know that am I missing out critical pieces of information. That's about it.
Did you think your interview went well? Even though it may not be the clincher.
I was not supremely confident after my interview because it is very fast paced. I always had that feeling I could have said more, I could have said less, I could have said more, I could have said less. So did I ace it? No. But I think what I was really proud of was that I was honest that this is what I do not know. This was advice also given to me by one of my Stanford seniors, that if you don't know anything, just say that you don't know. So one of my interviewers asked me, because I was working on the Swachh Bharat program, he said, what if this government goes away? What happens to your program then? And have you thought about the sustainability of such projects in general, right? Now Tata Trust is doing so much more work, so much money is being put in, right? So at that point of time, I said to my interviewer that, yes, that is a very compelling question. I unfortunately had not thought through the sustainability aspect. I was so focused on getting stuff done in a project mode and quick execution that planning had taken a backseat. And I have not thought through some of these issues. And moving on.
Yeah.
So I just said this. And you typically write a thank you message at the end of the interview.
Please do that, all of you. Yeah.
And so at the thank you message, I made it a point to say that your question around sustainability really made me think. And I think whenever I go forward in my life, I would layer get stuff done attitude with some bit of planning, if not complete planning, because you can get lost into planning also. That's what I wrote in my thank you message. Yeah, I think that might have done it.
And also, I think this message is not only thoughtful, it's honest and it's memorable. A lot of the interviews tend to be very generic. Like if you're sitting on the other side, you're basically tired of people talking about the same classes or similar things, of high achievers talking A, B, C, D. It gets boring. But when something like this happens, somebody's acknowledging, yeah, I don't know, but I'll think about it. I think it's, if nothing else, it's memorable. And you'll not forget the candidate. Something that you might want to keep in mind. Just the last two questions before the other members, you guys can ask questions off the record. What does an average day at Stanford look like? I know for a fact there's no average day in an MBA student's life, but still, like ballpark, what does it look like? And how is the experience preparing you for what do you think you will do post-Stanford?
Right. I will try and answer this from a generic and from a personal standpoint also. My personal days wake up between 5 to 6 a.m. I waste a little bit of time on my computer doing something. Then I do go for my run, and I think then depending on when the classes start, I would go for my classes, and typically classes go on till 4, 5, maximum 6 in the evening. There are a few courses which have late night classes, but Stanford is a fairly relaxing program. I get enough, like anybody can get decent amount of enough sleep if they prioritize studies and other experience as well. So yes, after coming back at 6, I think I have dinner, and then I again would do something, either interact with my roommates, discuss how the day was, or either go back to reading something or listening to a podcast or doing something productive. I think that's what my typical day is. For most people, I would say it's the same, except that many of my classmates and peers are slightly more academically inclined than I am. So the amount of time they would put into assignments or case studies or preparation for classes more than what I would. Like I listen to case studies from text to speech so that I can remember the main point, whereas others would choose to read it, because I think that saves time for me, and that's how I adopt. But like one of these days I would end up studying, but mostly not so much. Outdoors or running or maintaining fitness and keeping healthy is a big part of Stanford's culture in general. So all of us, which are 400 in number, I would say spend a significant amount of time keeping fit, being outdoors, keeping healthy, and that does form an integral part of the culture also.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, I think I would, in a typical week, 3 to 4 hours, I would meet some other people, meet other friends, ask them how their day was, engage in the random small talk, and see if I can have slightly more relaxed conversation, which I've tended to get better at time, and I find that annoying also. But yeah, that's typically what a day at Stanford would look like.
And how's the experience prepping you?
I think I'll tell you like my major learnings. Like my highest learnings have been skyrocketing of self-confidence. Same with risk tolerance also. I'm able to say no to very, very lucrative opportunities with fair bit of ease, I would say. And third, I would say, is that having been around that group of 400 odd people, I have come to cement my own strengths. So now what I'm focusing on, and for my future also, is how can those strengths become from 8 on 10 to 10 on 10, and how do I not let me excessively focus on my weaknesses, so that previously I used to do like, if my weakness is -2, like -3, I would want to bring it to 6 or 7. I've stopped doing that. And I think prioritization of time and an insatiable curiosity about how things work, I have received from Stanford. And they're very, very unquantifiable. And I think these are massive, massive predictors of success. And success is very subjective that way, but I owe these, I definitely owe these characteristics to Stanford.
Do you think you will end up in healthcare, doing what you said you would do in your application?
So I'm working on 2 ideas right now. One focused on producing more number of high quality nurses in India, something which I would want to do right after graduation if things work out. And the second was a coaching and mentoring platform for US adolescents to prevent mental health disorders from happening.
So you're already in the middle of working on it.
But yes, it has been a very genuine struggle also, because I do not have a technology background. Getting started there and solving those kind of problems is also hard.
Yeah.
And I'm working on both of them, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that by the time I graduate in June, I have some professional direction in either of these 2 ideas. If not, then I'll evaluate what else can I do.
Yeah. I just want to say that, it's been such a pleasure listening to you. You've made the entire application process and the entire structure of figuring careers accessible to a lot of our people. Now we're going to turn the mic off and let's get off record. Let's make radical candor to the next level, okay?
Okay.